Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Peace, peace, peace. So yesterday we looked at Narada's story and how it ended up with being the cause of the Rama Avatara, of how Rama was born. One story behind why God came down in the form of Ram. And as I said yesterday, stories are a great medium through which we learn to reflect and derive lessons for our own life. And the stories don't always necessarily have to be new stories, because it's not the newness of a story that helps us learn things, but even the same stories heard over and over and over again, we are able to see deeper meaning or different facets, even from the same story. Now, Ramayana, the Mahabharata, now these have been coming down from centuries, and yet we never get tired of listening to stories from them. Even though it's not like there is any big surprise or there is some suspense about what will happen. In fact, I believe it's a Telugu version of Ramayana. In one place, it is said that when it is time for Rama to go to forest, and so as we read in the Ramayana, the Sita says, I will come along with you. And then Rama says, no, you are not accustomed to the forest life. So you stay back in the palace. And I will go, I'll finish my 14 years and I'll come back. And so in one version of Ramayana, Sita asks Rama, saying, in which Ramayana is it written that Sita stays back and Rama goes to the forest alone? Sita always has to go. The idea is that, as Tulsidas also hints in his book, that Rama Avatara has not come even just once. In every kalpa, Rama Avatara comes. So if you have different stories or the details might vary from what is in Valmiki Ramayana, from Tulsi Ramayana, and on other versions of it. And no one can say that only one is the most authentic, accurate version, and so on. Tulsidas says all the stories are real. If it didn't happen in one kalpa, it probably happened in another kalpa. And so every experience that a devotee has of God, no experience is invalid. No one can say, oh, this is the true thing that you have seen, and this story that you have heard is not true. None of us can put a limit to what is possible about God. So we can continue to hearing stories we may have heard before. And I'm doing all this big introduction because the story that I'm going to share with you today, probably most of you know. In fact, I wrote about it recently on the Vedanta blog. And it's probably, I may have shared with you on some earlier occasion as well. There is we read in Sri Ramakrishna's life, you know, his nephew, Hriday, who took such good care of his uncle. But Hriday was a very interesting character. He was not as deeply spiritual as Ramakrishna was. And that is probably a good thing, because if Hriday himself had started going into Samadhi, then who would have taken care of Thakur? So it was good that someone who was more down to earth, so he took good care of Sri Ramakrishna. But because of his sometimes worldly tendencies, he tended to look at things in a slightly different way than Ramakrishna did. So, and when we read the Kathamrita, when we read the Gospel of Ramakrishna, we see that it's not as if in every page there is a new story. In fact, a lot of stories Thakur just keeps on repeating. There's a lot of repetition in the Gospel. And so Hriday, who is staying with Sri Ramakrishna all through, he has been being a part of this conversation that he was having, was hearing these stories over and over and over again. So one day he tells his Sri Ramakrishna and says, Mama, uncle, don't go on telling these same stories again and again and again. People will get bored and they will stop coming. And then Sri Ramakrishna also says, he says, what is that to you? These are my stories. I can tell them as often as I want. Anyway, the idea is that things don't have to be always something that we have never heard before. So today, I would share with you one, and possibly there is time, two stories from Krishna. One story is about the temple in Vrindavan. Raise your hands. How many of you have been to Vrindavan? Oh, good. Quite a number. So Vrindavan is a place so much associated with incidents from Krishna's childhood. In fact, although it was known that Krishna Leela, a lot of Krishna Leela took place in Vrindavan, it was not, the details were not known. It was Mahaprabhu Chaitanya. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was there, who went to Vrindavan and identified the exact spots. Because of his mystical experiences, he could go to a spot and then say, oh, this particular incident from Krishna's life occurred here. So when you go to Vrindavan now and then the guides show you to those places, it's good to remember that identifying every place where the different incidents occurred, it's not, sometimes people become skeptical and says, well, who knows? These may be just stories that the people may be saying. But here we have no less an authority from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, who had identified all those places. And so the Krishna Leela that occurred in Vrindavan. So there is this temple, one temple, probably, according to some, the most famous temple in Vrindavan is of Krishna as Bake Bihari. Bake is bent. We know that the traditional picture of Krishna is bent in three places as he plays on his flute. So the vigraha there, the image there, is said to have been worshipped by Sant Haridas, who was a guru of Tansen. So way back, I think probably 15th or 16th century, he found that image in Nidhuvan, that another one sacred spot in Vrindavan associated with the Ras Leela. And it was in his own personal shrine, he had worshipped that image. And decades, and maybe a couple of centuries later, this temple was built. I think probably 1862 or 1864. And that Sant Haridas image, which he worshipped, that image was brought and installed in this. And that is the image of Bake Bihari, because it was worshipped as Bake Bihari. So the interesting thing about this temple, and those of you who have been there already know this, is that normally when we go to a temple and the door opens and then there is in the sanctum, we're able to have darshan of the deities on the altar. But in this temple, you don't get to see the deity continuously. They have a curtain separating the altar from the devotees. So we are all standing in the prayer hall, and then the door is open, but there is a curtain. And then the pujari, the priest there, he'll be standing and then he opens the curtain. As soon as he opens the curtain, then everyone has the darshan, and then people will be doing Jai Jaikar. It's like, Jai Bake Bihari Lal ki Jai, maybe like 300, up to about 500 people can occupy that big hall in front. And then they quickly close the curtain again. And then there is a gap. Then once again, the curtain opens, and then people do Jai Jaikar. So now this way of opening and closing the curtain throughout the day, whenever the temple is open, it has become famous. They call it Jaki darshan. And Jaki means you just have a glimpse. You are not able to see the deity continuously. And there is often a question of why did this tradition start? We don't see that in other temples. Was this something that was initiated right when the temple started, or it happened at some point later on? Nowadays, among the explanations they give is that the power in the eyes of the deity is so strong that some devotees are not able to bear it, that people might fall down unconscious if they are continuously exposed to that power. So that is why they say that they close the curtain now and then. One other explanation that they give is that Krishna is worshipped in that temple as a child Krishna, Balakrishna, and we know it's a common tradition in India that for some time, especially when there are little babies and little children, parents will, just kind of dress them up to go out somewhere, and then afterward they'll put some spot here somewhere, just ki kisi ki nazar na lag jaye, that some, as they say, evil eye. Sometimes we feel that if someone appreciates the little baby this baby is so beautiful and so wonderful, and if something happens to the baby falls sick or something like that, then oftentimes there's a belief that kisi ki nazar lag gayi hai, that and so to avoid that, you'll usually put some mark somewhere. And so what the tradition also says is that this little Krishna, the Banke Bihari, is so beautiful, and he's a little baby. So someone's evil eye might fall and the baby might be hurt. And so that is why they are closing. So there are many different explanations that are given. Another explanation that is given was actually what I heard from one of our Swamis when I joined the order in the 70s. And so during, we meet every night after dinner in most of our centers, and we do some reading and there is some discussion. So during that time, one of the elderly Swamis, he narrated this story, and it made a deep impression on me. And this is about the history, about how this Jaki darshan started. And the story is like this. We know that many of our temples, usually outside the temple, you will find there'll be some small shops where they'll be selling these garlands and flowers and all puja items, the things that we want to make as an offering. And so similarly, even when this Banke Bihari temple started, there were these vendors outside selling these things. Now, among these vendors was a young girl. She was orphan. She lived by herself. Her parents had died in childhood. She was very good at making garlands. In fact, among all the people selling garlands there, her garlands were in great demand. Beautiful garlands she could make. And so the temple needed garlands for their daily puja. And so they contracted this little girl and said, can you supply us 10 garlands every day for our daily needs? And then at the end of the month, the temple would pay the girl for her. And the girl was, of course, happy to do that. And it was a steady source of income for her. And so that is how it was going on. Now, it so happened that this little girl was a great devotee of Krishna. And so she would make these garlands with great devotion. And it was her wish that she wanted to go and garland this child Krishna herself. But as we know, most of our temples, there is no direct access to the deity, except maybe some Shiva temple. If you go to Kashi Vishwanath temple, and if you're lucky to go near enough through all those crowds and those, it's possible to just go and touch the Shiva Linga. So some Shiva temples in North India, it's possible. But most temples, what stands between the pilgrims or the devotees and the deity is the pujari, the priest. So usually, whatever offerings we take, we hand it over to the priest. The priest then makes the offering on our behalf. And then whatever prasad, then the priest hands it over to us. So there's always this medium of the priest in the middle. We can't do it ourselves. Now, this little girl, she had a great desire to go and garland Krishna herself. But of course, that wasn't possible. So what she did was, although she was required to supply 10 garlands per day, she started sending in 11 garlands. One extra garland as her own personal offering. So she thought, well, one day these priests will notice there is an extra garland and then ask her about it. And then she will tell them, this extra garland is my personal offering to Krishna. And could you please allow me at least once to go and garland Krishna myself? And maybe just there is a chance that looking at my devotion, they might allow me. That was her hope. So she kept on sending this extra garland. Days passed, weeks passed, nothing. As oftentimes the priests are just doing their job and they may not always be very careful. So they did not even notice that an extra garland had come. So this girl got so disappointed. And then the thought came to her mind, will I never get a chance to put the garland myself on Krishna? So one day her heart was so filled with grief about it. So she goes inside the temple and standing inside the prayer hall, she just weeps and weeps and cries. And the thought that was in her mind was, okay, these priests didn't notice my extra garland. They are human beings, and human beings are oftentimes careless. So I don't blame them. But I'm sending this garland to Krishna. Didn't Krishna notice them? Why didn't he do something about it? And so that's how the thoughts were going on in her mind. And she was having this mental conversation with Krishna. Like, why don't you put this thought in this priest's mind to allow me to do it? Why don't you do it? And because her mind had become so one-pointed, and the prayer and the conversation with Krishna was so coming down from deep from her heart, that suddenly, sometimes when you put these noise-canceling headphones, all the sounds get silenced. Something like that happened to her. Because she was first hearing all the sounds of these devotees in this thing. But as her prayer became deeper and deeper and deeper, all other sound became less. And then she heard the voice of Krishna. And Krishna said, of course I know you have been sending this extra garland for all these weeks. And I'm so happy you're doing it. And then this girl said, just being happy about it is not enough. You know what I want. Why don't you make that possible? And then Krishna says, I really would love for you to come and put this garland on me. But unfortunately, I just don't know how to make that possible. And the girl says, what do you mean you don't know how to make that possible? You control the whole universe. Everything and everyone in this universe goes according to your wishes. Nothing is impossible for you. And Krishna says, well, that may be, but in this temple, as long as I'm inside the temple, I have no freedom. These pujaris control everything. When I should go to sleep, when I should wake up, what I should eat, when I should eat, how much I should eat. I have no freedom. This girl was so confused. She said, I don't believe it. You are the one who's supposed to give moksha to all of us. You are supposed to the one who gives us freedom, and you don't have freedom yourself. And then Krishna says, yeah, that's that's the sad reality. So Krishna said, okay, but there is a way out. Krishna says, you come at night. All these priests will have gone home by that time. Night you come, and that time you can garland me. Then this girl says, but at night the temple will be closed, the doors will be locked. How can I get in? And Krishna said, no, that I can manage. Night you come. After the temples are closed, it's dark, then you come. So this girl said, okay, since Krishna has assured her, so she goes home, she prepares some extra special garland, she cooks some special dishes and butter and everything that she knew Krishna loves. She brought all those things in a basket. In another, she had a lantern because it was getting dark. And at night, after the temple was closed, it was dark, no one is around, she quietly comes near the temple. These big doors, there is that entrance of the Banke Bihari temple, it's a big door, it's a huge door. So she was wondering how she would go inside. But as soon as she comes near that big door, the door opens by itself. And then she's able to go in. When she goes inside near the sanctum door opens. She's able to go. And she's so happy. Finally, she's there near Krishna. And she said, she starts about to start dancing. She said, okay, now I'm going to put this garland on you. And I'm going to worship you now. And Krishna says, oh, that's great. But he said, no, wait a minute. I think there is one more problem. The girl said, now what? And Krishna says, look, this light, everything is dark. You brought this light with you, and we need light, of course. Otherwise, how can we see each other? But this light will be going out through these chinks in these windows and doors. And if people see suddenly there is light at night inside the temple, they are going to get worried. People are going to come and see what happened. So it's not safe to do it here. So he says, better is, let's go to your home. He said, what? And then Krishna said, no, that's the safest way. You lead the way, I'll follow you. So the girl said, okay. So she then again picks up her basket, takes the lantern, comes out. It's kind of a little rainy day. So the ground is a little wet. So she said, just be careful. And so she's through the lantern, she shows light, and Krishna follows her. Now her house is not that far away. And so very quickly, in 5 or 10 minutes, they're able to reach her home. So she opens the door, Krishna walks inside, and then he says, look, close the door, close all the windows, latch them well. And then he said, now he sits on her bed and he says, now you can worship me to your heart's content. Now there's nobody to come and disturb us here. And she says, okay. And so when she's about to begin the puja, Krishna said, okay, there's one other problem. Like one after the other different problems. So she said, now what? And Krishna says, I have one weakness. When I'm in the company of my devotees, I lose all sense of time. But I have to be back in the temple before 7 o'clock tomorrow, because the priests, they come in the morning at 7 o'clock. It's interesting. Many temples open up much earlier, but Banke Bihari temple, it opens sometime around, the first puja and the doors open, I think around 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And the reason is, Krishna is little. Children sleep for a long time. They don't want to wake up the little baby early in the morning. So it's kind of very leisurely, lazy pace. So the priests come in around 7 o'clock or so. And so Krishna says, I need to be back before 7. Because if the priests come into the temple and find I'm missing, then there's going to be a problem. So just keep an eye on the clock so that I have time enough to go back. And then she said, okay, I'll try. But she says, you know what if I forget? So then she said, you also, let's both of us try to keep our part of the mind on the clock so that we don't overshot the time. And so then it's wonderful. And then as we do traditionally in puja, the padyam, arghyam, washing feet of Krishna, decorating them with flowers, sandal paste. She does arati, she puts a garland on him, she feeds him with butter and all very delicious sweets. And then Krishna says, I want to hear some bhajan. And she sings beautifully, her heart filled with devotion. She sings songs for Krishna, and Krishna is so happy. Krishna gets up and starts dancing, and then she starts dancing. And they dance and sing for a long time. Both of them lose sense of time. So when this singing and dancing is going on, they have no idea. The night is over, the sun has risen, the doors and windows are closed. Remember, they have no idea at all. And then suddenly they hear, tuck, 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 a big knocking on the door. Open the door, open the door, open the door. And then Krishna tells his little girl, oh my God, somebody has come. It's funny, Krishna saying, oh my God. So she says, open the door. And then she says, she's afraid. She's a little girl. She said, no, I can't do it. You open the door. And Krishna said, no, wait a minute. This is your home, not mine. You are the one. You are the host here. You need to open the door. And so she says, okay. And so she goes and opens the door. And suddenly she finds that head priest and 3 or 4 other priests, they all are standing there. Where is the image? And she's like dumbstruck. And she's not able to say anything. And then they just push her aside and walk inside a room. Where have you hidden the image? And of course, they don't have to search for the image long, because they just find this Banke Bihari, who has walked by himself all that way, was this fully living, speaking, dancing Krishna, has again become the image, and he's just lying on the bed there. And they said, here is that image. This girl stole it and brought it. And this girl says, no, I didn't steal that image. He in fact called me. He called me at night. Then he himself said he wants to come to my home. He walked with me. Then we sang, we danced. He ate the food that I gave. He came on his own. I didn't steal him. And then this pujari, the priest said, yeah. You think we are such idiots to kind of accept this story? Who has ever heard of an image walking and going? You remember, this was way before Sri Ramakrishna. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had so much doubts. But they said, and then the priest said, see, I have been doing worship there for last 25 years. What to speak of walking or talking? Krishna has not even winked at me even once. And before me, my father, and before that, my grandfather did puja. None of them has seen it. We did it with great devotion, but Krishna never talked with us. And now you want us to believe that Krishna talked with you and walked with you all this way? And the poor girl was crying and saying, please believe me, that's what he did. That's what he did. And of course, nobody believed her. But there was no time to lose because it was already late. So this head priest told these other priests, first now, without any delay, pick up this image, go back to the temple, install it, and start with your morning puja. And luckily, no one in Vrindavan came to know all this drama had occurred at night. So this head priest, who stayed back for a few minutes, told this little girl, now pack up your things and go away from this place. If you go away from this place, don't ever come back again. Otherwise, I'll let the police know, and then you will be arrested for this theft. So this little girl got so terrified. So, and this threat given by that priest. So she packed up her belonging, which were not much, and she left Vrindavan, and no one ever heard from her again. So then this priest returns, and then the temple opens at usual time. People go, and nobody knows whatever had happened. Now that evening, all these priests have a meeting. And in the meeting, they are wondering what is to be done now. This whole thing that happened, the theft that occurred, what are the security measures they can take that something like this doesn't happen again? Now, the head priest, he was a very person with a thoughtful person, with great devotion. So he said, I think what this girl was saying was true. That was true. Because he said, first of all, that image is so heavy. This little girl could not have lifted that image and gone all that way. So I believe that Krishna himself actually went there. And he went there because he's such a compassionate person that when he saw that his devotee who loves him so much, who has so much devotion for him, the devotee praying so hard, so much from her heart, and pleading with him, his heart melted. And that is why he chose to go with her. So the problem is not that the girl stole Krishna's image. The problem is Krishna's compassionate nature. So then the priest said, this time we were a little bit lucky that this little girl did not live far away. It was also the rainy season, I said. So when they had walked out, there were footprints outside the temple. That is how when these priests came, they were able to see these two sets of footprints, which is what they had followed. And that is how they knew where Krishna was taken. Now this priest said, what if next time some devotee comes who also prays with intensity, and then God's heart melts and Krishna's heart melts? And maybe what if that devotee is not living anywhere in Vrindavan, maybe living somewhere far away? Maybe a devotee from Pittsburgh, or maybe a devotee from some different country. Now, if a devotee comes from such a far distance and Krishna's heart melts and Krishna says, you know what, come on, let's go to your home. Then where are we going to search? It will be impossible to find him. And we should do something about it. So they asked, do you have any suggestions of how to prevent now Krishna from going away like this to devotees' homes? And then one young priest came up with a brilliant idea. So he said, let's put a curtain in the middle. Now, what is the advantage of that curtain? The advantage of the curtain is when the curtain is closed, the devotees cannot see Krishna and Krishna cannot see devotees. Now, when the hall becomes filled with people, 300, 400, 500 people, all waiting for the curtain to open and have darshan of Krishna, then the curtain is open. When the curtain is opened, Krishna sees hundreds of devotees in front and all saying, Banke Bihari Lal ki jai, and with great enthusiasm. And as soon as Krishna starts focusing and trying to see devotees in particular, suddenly the curtain closes again. So what happens is Krishna is able to see this whole crowd of devotees, but he's not able to see any one particular person. Because the idea is, if he starts paying attention to person individually and start listening to their prayers, and then again feels a lot of compassion, and then says, come at night, I'll go with you, then there's a problem. And so to prevent Krishna from going away, this curtain is closed. And that's how this tradition of Jaki darshan started. It was to prevent this Krishna from going away. Now, it's an interesting story. There's a lot to think about. Um, one important teaching from this story is recognizing that that kind of a Jaki darshan is occurring in the internal life of every spiritual seeker who has a prayer and meditation practice. All of us who have tried to meditate, who have tried to pray, we know that although we are often told, pray to God in your heart, but when we close our eyes, uh, most of us see just darkness. Now, the darkness is not because God is not there. The darkness is because the curtain is closed. The curtain is separating us. So, God sitting in our heart, and there is a curtain. That is why when you close your eyes and try to think of God, you're not able to see God because it's dark. The curtain is there. Now, all that we need to do, and as devotees do when they go to that temple, when the curtain is closed, they don't say, "Oh, it's closed. Let's go. Let's go," and no point in waiting. Sometimes people become impatient, but there are others who say, "No, wait a minute. Huh? Have a little patience. The curtain will open soon." And so those who wait, they find after some time the curtain opens. So similarly, in our own personal lives, with our daily practice of japa, meditation, and so on, even when we see only darkness in our heart, we should continue doing our practice with this faith, the curtain will open. Now, none of us knows when exactly that curtain will open. In some cases, it could be right away, it might open. Sometimes it might take a few minutes, a few hours. Sometimes it might take days. In some cases, it might take months. Sometimes it could take even years. So a lot of patience is needed. Patience and faith that no matter how much time it takes, I'm going to be here. There is a saying in North India, they often say, कि प्रभु के दरवाजे पर कुत्ते के माफिक पड़े रहो. That just wait outside the door of your master like a dog. Now, those who have had pets at home, not just any pet, I think probably a cat may not care, but if you have a dog and you just put the dog outside the door and shut the door, the dog won't say, "Oh, these people don't care for me, I don't care for them," and just walk away. That won't happen. The dog will just remain there with that faith that sometime or the other, the door will open. And so you keep the door closed for hours, for days, the dog will not go. Once Swami Vivekananda described his devotion to Sri Ramakrishna as saying, "Mine is a dog's devotion." And so this, when we try to meditate and we see darkness in the heart, we should not get discouraged. We should continue with the faith and the hope that the curtain will open one day. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of traditional farmers and casual farmers. So he says that sometimes when people living in urban areas who have some money to spare and they hear, "Oh, you can make a lot of money through agriculture or through farming," might go and buy some big farmland and become farmers. And then maybe first year they make some profit, but then second year, third year, fourth year, 3, 4, 5 years, there is a drought and there is no rain. And these people find, "Oh, there is no rain, we're not making enough money, just sell this thing and move on to doing something else." But those who are traditional farmers, hereditary farmers, they don't give it up. That's been something they have been doing for generations. And so even if there is no rain, they will say, "Okay, God's grace, if not this time, let me plan for something. So they will continue to it. So as spiritual seekers also, we have to ask, what kind of a spiritual seeker am I? Am I going to get discouraged if I don't immediately find results? Or am I going to say, I have faith that God will reveal in my heart sooner or later. I'm not going to get discouraged. I'm going to have infinite patience. So that's what a spiritual seeker can do. That's what you and I can do. That when we pray, when we meditate, even if we read in the books about these great saints and mystics, how their heart is filled with effulgence, they have these visions and they have these wonderful experiences. And of course, we would have liked to have that also. But oftentimes, especially when we begin our meditation practice, in the beginning, we are all very enthusiastic. Like in a matter of days or something, I'm going to go into samadhi right away. And some people might. But oftentimes, we recognize it's a hard struggle. Swami Brahmanandaji described spiritual life. He said, I can describe spiritual life in 3 words. He said, struggle, struggle, struggle. That's it. So if we are struggling in our spiritual life, means we are doing what needs to be done. So don't be afraid of struggle. Struggling in spiritual life is not a sign of failure. A struggling in spiritual life is a sign that I'm really doing what needs to be done, because everyone struggles. Some people give up the struggle quickly and saying, oh no, it's not going to work, or this is not for me. And they just give up. But if you are a traditional farmer, the kind Sri Ramakrishna mentions, then you will not give up. So we will continue our japa, meditation, prayer, whatever other parts of our sadhana are, whether it's singing bhajans or doing nishkam seva or serving other people selflessly, all of that we will continue to do even when this curtain remains closed. Now, when we do that with patience, with purity, with perseverance, with faith, with sincerity, with regularity, and we have to be always alert, because you are not going to get an intimation in advance. You're not going to get an email or a text message saying, tomorrow morning, you're going to get a vision. It doesn't happen that way. Or the curtain is going to open tomorrow. You don't get any intimation. It happens at the most unexpected time. So we have always to be vigilant, always to be hopeful. Otherwise, the curtain might open and I'm looking somewhere else. I wouldn't even know. And that could happen even when people go to the Banki Bihari temple and they are like waiting and waiting and the curtain is closed. And then the friends who have gone there, they start chatting at the back of the hall and they are immersed deep into some conversation. And then they look up again, the curtain is closed, and they ask somebody, "Ye kabhi khulega? When will this curtain open?" And the people say, "Oh, it just opened 2 minutes ago." "Oh, but we didn't notice it," because you're talking among yourselves. So that can happen also. If you're not alert, the curtain of the heart may have opened briefly, but we were not even paying attention. So we may not even know. So we have to be always alert, always vigilant. You'll see in Sri Ramakrishna's conversations, he again and again, there is one phrase in Bengali, he just says, "Savadhan, savadhan ho." Now that word savadhan often gets translated into English as be careful, be attentive. But sa avadhan, avadhan means attention. Sa avadhan, sah means with attention. So even when we are praying, even when we are meditating, it's not just about mechanically repeating the mantra. Am I doing it with my full attention? So when we keep in mind all these tips and continue doing it without losing hope, one day the curtain opens. And it may not remain open for a long time. It opens and it closes. You're just at the Jaki, a brief glimpse into the presence of your Ishta inside your heart. But even that very brief glimpse fills your heart with joy. It's very difficult after that first experience to have any doubt that God truly exists. No amount of arguments, even if some big atheist comes and tries to prove to you that all this is nonsense, you may not argue back with that person, but deep down you know, I have seen. It may be a very tiny glimpse, but I have seen. Now, this kind of a first glimpse of the presence of God in our heart is a mixed experience. It's a mixed because on one hand, we are very extremely happy. Suppose someone is meditating on Krishna or Rama or Ramakrishna, and you are able to see this glimpse, not just of a picture of Ramakrishna or a picture of Krishna, but actually a living Krishna, living Rama. You're able to see them alive, filled with light. Now that fills our whole being with not just joy, but also enormous strength, enormous confidence. It strengthens our faith enormously. That it brings Shraddha inside the heart. Now that's the positive side. The other side is you just become hungry to have that darshan again. You see, when you have not tasted, let's say, maybe there's some special dish. Maybe you have never tasted tiramisu, for instance, and someone brings tiramisu before you, just a tiny, a half a spoon, and you say, just taste it a little bit. And you taste it, and you say, this is amazing. And then you want more, and they said, no more. No, that's going to be very frustrating. You just had a little spoonful of it, you loved it, but there is no more there. So that's what happens. So you have this first glimpse of presence of God in the heart. You're filled with joy, you love it, and you want more of it. But immediately it's not available because the curtain is closed. So once again, struggle. Again, there is no guarantee when that second time the curtain will open. There is no fixed timetable for it. Again, it could be in matter of minutes, hours, days, months, even years. Again, you have to see, I'm not going to give up. So one who never gives up. So that admonition that Krishna gives to Arjuna in the second chapter of the Gita, when he just at the beginning, Klaibyam masmagamav partha naitatva upapadyate. What are you doing this? Arise, awake. Don't give up. That is really meant for a spiritual seeker. Don't get disheartened. Continue doing your meditation. Continue doing it even when the curtain has closed again. If we try to do that, and then again be attentive. Don't get distracted. And then again, the most unexpected time, unexpected way, the curtain opens a second time. And again, your heart is filled with joy. Again, it may not remain open for a long time. It closes. The Jaki darshan is very quick. If you're not attentive, you will miss it. But one who continues to do their daily prayer, japa, meditation, without getting discouraged, with great patience, with great faith, will eventually find that the curtain starts opening more frequently. They will gradually find that when the curtain opens, it will remain open for a little bit longer time. And then the times it remains closed will progressively become less and less and less. And eventually, when a person realizes God, when a person becomes enlightened, the curtain completely goes out. There is no curtain separating at all. Then it's no longer Jaki darshan, it's Nitya darshan. So that is the great teaching we learn from this beautiful little story. That it's not just about what happened there at that time, what may or may not have happened, but about this real Jaki darshan, the real curtain, the real hide and seek between God and devotee that is continuously occurring. But we will know about this only if we have a daily practice of our own. Only if we continue to struggle to see God in our heart. Because nothing comes free in life, as they say. Even sometimes now, most people use smartphones and look for app stores. And there are plenty of apps which are free. And you think, oh, it's a free app, so it's easy to download. And one of the things we learn sooner or later is that nothing is free. Even the free apps that you get are not really free. You are paying for it in a way that you don't know. So free apps are actually more expensive in some ways because you don't know what you are paying and how much you are paying and what you are losing. You just have an illusion that it's free. On the other hand, sometimes some apps for which you pay, you at least know that you're paying something for it. So in spiritual life also, there is no free ride. Remember, if my spiritual practice is going to give me enlightenment, that is the highest anyone can expect. It is going to remove our suffering forever. Now, that's not going to happen if I just say, okay, just kind of do a little bit of meditation for a few minutes, and then after a few days say, doesn't work, nothing happens. Who knows if God is there or not? That's ridiculous. You have to pay the price to get this precious pearl of moksha, of enlightenment, of Ishwar darshan. And the price we are paying here is constant attention, being alert, and doing whatever spiritual practice we have received from our Guru, to do that with faith, with regularity, with sincerity, and with devotion. So those are some of the thoughts that come to my mind with this story. So now, as we did yesterday, just give some thought to it. And if you would like to share what your thoughts are after hearing this story, what thoughts come to your mind. So if you feel so inclined, do